special week here on the ReLoaded podcast. Dave Bradshaw here with you alongside James R. Kennedy. And James, you know exactly why it is a special week, because we have a very special guest, a man who is just about to return to the ring after over 8 months on the shelf. He is, of course, the former Deputy General Manager of Defiant Wrestling, and he is joining us later on this program, Simon Miller. You must be as excited as I am.
Oh, God. I really cannot believe that we have reached this point where Simon Miller is on the ReLoaded podcast. Now, listen, yes, I will acknowledge that Miller has a vast social media audience. He has a reach that many people could only dream of. But Dave, Simon Miller, I mean, goodness gracious, this man is preparing to make a massive in-ring comeback. Okay, that's newsworthy, but did you really have to put me through this? I mean, honestly.
I should say this interview with Simon we've already done. So it happened on Sunday. We caught him back in the locker room area after Loaded. And I had a great time. But I just got the impression throughout that interview, and again, we'll hear it in a few minutes, but it was like you weren't fully enjoying yourself.
Well, that's a gross understatement, because, quite frankly, I felt like, I was the victim of some sort of numbers game between you and Miller. And not only that, but the table we were sitting around as well wasn't very big. And that meant that Miller, with all his muscles and his intense stare and that weird kind of half angry, half smile expression that he had when he was looking at me, it was all smiles for you, but when he was looking at me, he was almost upset about something. I can't think why, but it was very intimidating, and I quite frankly did not feel safe.
Well, how do you think I felt when you had John Klinger on the show, or when you had SCC on the show?
Yeah, but John Klinger was over the phone. The SCC are just great young lads, and also we had Rory Coyle, who interjected himself, which neither you or I set up. It just sort of happened.
Well, so you say, yeah.
It's completely different, to be honest. You had Simon Miller sit there with his huge biceps, slapping his head, saying, "Why? Here's why," and all that sort of stuff. It was very intimidating, and afterwards I had to go for a bit of a cry, because I felt very emotional and double-teamed as well. It just was a horrible experience. I'm sure all the listeners of the ReLoaded podcast will enjoy hearing from Simon Miller, but I didn't have fun.
I mean, heaven forbid anyone hold you accountable for what you say on this show, just as Simon did. You'll hear it in a minute, but we do talk with Simon about exactly what his response is to your claim last week that he's not future world champion material. So that was interesting. We'll get to that. If it's any consolation, I'm a little bit irritated about a couple of things this week as well. Can I get those off my chest since I've let you vent about Simon?
Go on then, cheer me up.
Well, yeah, my misery cheers you up. That says a lot about you as a person. But anyway, first of all, the No Regrets Rumble draw has begun. We've seen various members of the Defiant roster picking their entry number for that big Rumble match on May 25th. And unfortunately, it's gone just about as badly as it could in terms of who has drawn number 30. An absolutely wretched human being, Gabriel Kidd, has the utmost advantage going into that big match, because he will be the last man to enter.
I can almost hear the excitement in your voice. The young bull. Now, number 30 in the upcoming No Regrets Rumble, and in my humble opinion, that makes Gabriel Kidd the firm favourite. There's no doubt in my mind, no doubt whatsoever, that Gabriel Kidd will walk away from this the winner, and he's going to bag himself a shot at that Defiant Championship at Built to Destroy. And Bradshaw, this is huge. Finally, fate has intervened in all this circus-like behaviour that's been following the management structure here in Defiant Wrestling. Fate has intervened and ensured that we will have a fine young challenger for that Defiant Championship. Gabriel Kidd, in my opinion, will win the No Regrets Rumble.
Well, he definitely has a good chance, unfortunately, because of his position in the match. I'm sure you'll have about 10 more picks before we get to the match anyway, but you might not be wrong, and that's what's annoying me. And it upsets me deeply that someone with that kind of attitude, that kind of personality, gets that kind of luck.
He's a go-getter. Gabriel Kidd is a go-getter.
He's lucky.
Well,
he's lucky. I mean, it's luck to get number 30, so he's lucky.
Yeah, but what did I just say? It's almost like the law of attraction. Fate has intervened and ensured that Gabriel Kidd is on the right path. I think he deserves it. I really, really do. All the comments that you have made sniping behind Gabriel Kidd's back.
Name one. No. Name one of those comments that wasn't justified.
Well, I'd have to go back through the archives, but if you give me a few days, I'm sure I'd be able to put together some kind of package that shows how biased you have been against the young bull. It doesn't matter who he's in there against, you find a way to tear him down. But being the fine young prodigy that Gabriel Kidd is, he finds a way to overcome that every single time.
Now, anyway, I'm not going to talk anymore about Gabriel Kidd because I've already had enough of talking about him. Another thing I'm annoyed about was the outcome of our main event. Aussie Open, the longest reigning tag team champions in Defiant history, had a chance to become 3-time champions at the expense of the men who beat them for the championships, SCC, the South Coast Connection. But once again, Kelly Six and Ashley Dunn cheated. They took a shortcut and shenanigans ensued before they were able to retain those Defiant Tag Team Championships against a much more deserving team. And I'm sure you're going to now, having defended Gabriel Kidd, you're going to find some bizarre way to defend our Tag Team Champions as well.
Well, Aussie Open are a great, great tag team. They held the Defiant Tag Team titles for almost a full calendar year.
Yeah, the but.
I believe there's about to be a new record set because once more the South Coast Connection, a fearless, flawless victory. They are rightfully your Defiant Tag Team Champions. Kelly Six, Ashley Dunn. I talk about Gabriel Kidd always finding a way. Well, the SCC, they really take the biscuit when it comes to that because they are so resourceful. So resourceful. It's wonderful to watch.
Resourceful. That's one word for it, I suppose. I suppose that's a word you could use for successful burglars as well. Oh yeah, very resourceful. They've stolen from a lot of houses.
Listen, you cannot tell me that you're going to sit there and compare Kelly Six and Ashley Dunn to burglars.
I mean they're thieves. They're thieves because every time they have tag team championship matches, they steal the victory. Every time. Every single time.
You're looking at it the wrong way, Dave. The way you should be looking at it is that they could set a new record. Now, Aussie Open, as I said, almost a year as tag champs, they were so impressive, but the SCC are the new kids on the block, and they could go the whole way here. Now, if you're Aussie Open, you have to wonder what the future holds, and that's the question I'm going to pose to you, because now, Aussie Open, they were on the comeback trail, they believed that they would regain those tag team titles against the SCC. It didn't happen on a worldwide stage, the main event of Loaded. What's next for Kyle Fletcher and Mark Davis? That's the $1 million question.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think if you're Davis and Fletcher, you probably were banking on that rematch and thinking, you know what, that this was a fluke. First time when the SCC won the titles, they came in with a very nefarious plan to take out Davis before the match. The plan succeeded, but you've got to think that Aussie Open would have come into this thinking, you know what, we're not going to fall for that a second time. And somehow SCC found a way to once again cheat. So, I mean, it's back to the drawing board, isn't it, for Aussie Open? But it just seems so terribly unfair that, you talk about SCC breaking records. I would say, yeah, they've already broken a record. Most illegitimate victories of any tag team champion ever.
Well, even if that were true, it's still a record. And you have to be known for something in this life. Now, I'm known for wearing amazing jackets at ringside. You're known for peddling these ridiculous conspiracy theories. And the SCC are known as the Defiant Tag Team Champions. Now, whether you want to say that they are cheating, that's not what the record books will say. They will say that Six and Dunn were victorious once again against Aussie Open. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters.
I don't know. We seem to go in circles with SCC because, again, once you have absolutely no moral compass whatsoever. Speaking of people who totally lack class, the other person I want to talk about briefly is our Defiant Women's Champion, Lizzie Styles. What was all that about? I mean, that the words that she had for just about everyone, and then especially for Visage, who answered the open challenge on Sunday night, that was absolutely not behaviour that's befitting of someone who's one of our champions.
Well, Lizzie Styles sending out an open challenge, and I cannot think for 1 second that the One Woman Army expected Visage to answer. Now, can you imagine Visage had beaten Styles to become the new women's champion? Now, listen, before you interject, I know what you're going to say, or you'd hate that, James. No, I wouldn't. And I'll tell you why, because Visage has quite the following on social media themselves. Defiant's audience, they love what Visage represents. They love the new tag team that they've formed with Jack Sexsmith, the Tuck Shop. It would have been massive had Visage won the Women's Championship, but here's the fact, they didn't. Lizzie Styles, unprepared though she was, she came out on top, and Lizzie Styles is still the Women's Champion, and it's going to be so interesting because at No Regrets now we know that Lizzie Styles is sending out another open challenge. Hopefully Visage sees sense and doesn't, stick their neck out again. I'm not sure who's going to answer that open challenge, but I think it's so brave of Lizzie Styles to do this not once, but twice.
Do you think there is a danger for Lizzie Styles? I was about to say if you're a Lizzie Styles fan, but for goodness sake, who would be?
Well, me.
That I'm sure that by putting out these open challenges, she's getting a little bit overconfident. Because if you're a champion, and you like to talk about being a smart champion, like you were just talking about with SCC, why would you put yourself in a disadvantageous position of not knowing who your opponent is going to be, just like Styles did on Sunday? Is it hubris? Is it thinking that you're more invincible than you are?
Well, I think that Lizzie Styles has every reason to believe that she is invincible, because not only did she physically dominate every other woman in Defiant Wrestling, psychologically, she destroyed Kanji as a champion. She tore her down mentally and then took her prize, the Defiant Women's Championship, and we don't know when or if we'll ever see Kanji again. And that's because of Lizzie Styles. And also, Dave, you cannot sit there and criticise Styles for being a fighting champion when all you do is lambast the internet champion Martin Kirby for his absences, just because Kirby thinks that, or knows rather, that he should only compete on pay-per-view. You think that's wrong, but in the same breath, you're going to say that Lizzie Styles is wrong for being a fighting champion. I don't get it.
Don't conflate those two things. Those are two totally different issues. In Martin Kirby's case, I'm saying the problem is he refuses to defend the title whatsoever unless it's on pay-per-view. In Styles' case, I'm not criticising her for being a fighting champion. There's plenty of other things I could criticise Lizzie Styles for. What I'm saying is I don't know whether it's strategically sound to do so in such a way where you're putting yourself out there with a mystery opponent every time. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying she shouldn't defend the title. I'm just saying by putting out this open challenge, it's not necessarily the smartest thing to do, and I wonder if it's a sign that she's overconfident.
Well, confidence does incredible things, because we understand that not only is Lizzie Styles set to send out another open challenge for that title at No Regrets, but there is talk as well that she could enter the No Regrets Rumble, and that is massive. This is history-making stuff.
So. She said so, right? She said she stole my headset at the end of that match and said she's entering herself. Now, we haven't heard whether her entry is confirmed, but but that's overconfidence, right? Because Styles grabs the commentator's headset and says, I'm entering myself in the No Regrets Rumble. Well, that's not how it works. You don't get to enter yourself. Now, whether General Amin decides to allow Lizzie Styles in, we'll find out very shortly, I'm sure. But again, it's overconfidence, just thinking that you have the right to interject yourself into any match that you want.
Well, what a night it could be on May 25th in Manchester for Lizzie Styles. Not only does she have that open challenge, she will aim to defend her Women's Championship, but can you imagine if Lizzie Styles won that No Regrets Rumble as well? I mean, you're talking... I think she would have to get on daytime TV. She'd have to be on the cover of magazines and newspapers all over the globe. She'd become a social media icon because she'd be trending permanently. I mean, this is huge, huge stuff. Lizzie Styles is a history maker. That's exactly what she is. She turns heads and then she smashes faces of her opponents until she gets what she wants.
All right, well, we'll see how things go for Lizzie Styles in the build-up to No Regrets. We've been talking about it throughout the show. It is taking place May 25th in Manchester. If you want to join us, there are still some tickets left. wearedefiant.com/tickets if you want to join us for May 25th, No Regrets in person. Or, of course, you can catch it on demand at Access Defiant. That's access.wearedefiant.com. And as we always tell you, if you are a new customer, you get a 30-day free trial so you can watch the entirety of No Regrets without paying a penny. Shall we talk about, the Rumble aside, the other, I guess, co-main event of No Regrets is going to be the World Championship match. We know now that there is going to be a number one contendership match on this coming Sunday's Loaded. But it's a little bit controversial, isn't it, because of the way this all came about. We saw Mark Haskins and David Starr come and visit General Amin back in his office during Loaded, and both of them demanded to be the number one contender. He made what I thought was a perfectly reasonable decision to say, you know what, you both deserve it, so you can have a number one contendership match next week. And then behind Amin's back, Nathan Cruz, the professional, goes to Amin's deputy, Adam Foster, and demands to be added to the match. Foster acquiesces, and suddenly we've got a three-way match. We'll talk about what that does for the relationship between Amin and Foster in a minute, but whatever else it is, and I do have some problems with it, obviously, but it was pretty shrewd by Nathan Cruz, wasn't it, to go in there and use, I guess, what he considered the weak link in the management team in Adam Foster to get himself into the match.
100%. Now, what does Nathan Cruz call himself? The professional. Everything he does, everything is calculated. Every single movement that he makes, every person he speaks to backstage, it's all calculated. It's all designed to further his career. And that is exactly what Nathan Cruz has done, because whether anyone likes it or not, whether Mark Haskins likes it, whether David Starr likes it, whether General Amin likes it, he gave his assistant, Simon Miller, autonomy, who then passed it down before he left office to Adam Foster. They have control over what happens in this company as well, and Adam Foster says Nathan Cruz is in, and this match is now a triple threat. So whether anyone likes it or not, Nathan Cruz got results, and he has put himself in a great position, because if he wins that triple threat match, he will go on to face Rampage or whoever the champion is at No Regrets. But what a match this is going to be. You talk about three of the finest talents in Defiant Wrestling. This is going to be huge.
Yeah, David Starr, Mark Haskins, Nathan Cruz, this coming Sunday on Loaded on the Defiant Wrestling YouTube channel, 8 p.m. UK time, if you want to see who is going to be the number one contender headed into No Regrets. Let's talk about Amin and Foster then. And specifically, obviously, it's interesting anyway if there's some kind of disagreement between the general manager and his assistant, as there apparently has been. But it's particularly interesting when those two are going into a very rare in-ring appearance next week. So it's going to be General Amin, Simon Miller, and Adam Foster against the Anti-Fun Police in a six-man match this coming Sunday. I wonder, and I have been wondering ever since that was announced, whether Amin and Foster can stay on the same page. But rather than ask you about it, this might be an opportune moment to go to our guest on this week's show, because we put that very question, among others, to one Simon Miller this past Sunday after Loaded had gone off the air, and he also had a fair few things to say about you. Let's have a listen. We are here back in the locker room area at Loaded with Simon Miller. Why are you shaking your head? What's wrong with you?
Get on with it. Come on, just get on with it.
Well,
He's shaking his head like I can't. I can see you shaking your head,
Dave,
James.
he won't stop looking at me. I don't know why you've done this to me, Dave.
Well, you know exactly why we've done it, because Simon is just days away now from his return match here in Defiant. Now, how long has it been? 8-9 months
8
now
months.
on the shelf?
8 months, quick return for old Miller. But hey, man, better late than never.
Well, first question, how's the shoulder?
Let's hope it's all right. Let's hope. I mean, it should. I've been told it's all right. It should be all right. I don't think anyone's really 100% confident that an injury is going to be all right after being out for so long. But you got to throw yourself into these things and take the opportunities. I'm good to go. That's how I'm looking at it.
Well, I'm very happy to see you. I'm not sure my broadcast partner. You've been looking perturbed ever since we started this interview a few moments ago. What's wrong?
Perturbed. Did you learn a new word? Is that what we're
lots
to
of
take?
words.
Go on, give us some big words. Go on.
I don't need to entertain you. Answer my question.
Well, I just want to put off this ridiculous. Dave, blatantly, this is you trying to get back at me for getting SCC, the tag team champions, on the ReLoaded podcast. We all know it. You know it. I know it. Even Simon Miller knows it.
Okay, do you think I really care enough about what you think to make our bookings based on who you don't like? As I said, Simon is here because he's about to have his return match back. But since we're talking about your little tantrums, let's talk about the one you had last week when we were talking about Simon. And one of our listeners asked the question, could Simon Miller be a future world champion? James here had a few choice words about what he thought of your chances. What's your response to that, Simon?
My response is never let the haters get you down. Never let negativity get in the way of positivity. So, man, I'll take great pride, my friend James, in proving you wrong down the line. And hey, man, look, it's not all about winning the world title straight away. I agree with everyone said. You got to earn that. You got to earn it, and I will earn it. And when I do, I'll make sure I pick it up, walk over to you in the commentary booth, and just shove it right in your face. And we can have a lovely little moment together.
Or you could just apologise now for what you said last week, and none of that needs to happen.
Apologise for what?
For what you said about
And
it.
by the way, I did notice that our guest on today's Reloaded podcast called me his friend, Dave.
Everyone's my friend. Everyone. Especially people like you. Especially because you're the ones that you motivate me more than anyone. The people the naysayers, the people that say, Miller can't do it, he can't do it, awesome. I'll prove them wrong. And if I don't, hey, at least I tried.
There are 100 James R. Kennedys in the comment section of every YouTube video.
Right, listen, this is getting out of hand. I'm being double teamed here, and I don't like it. This isn't a handicap match. This is a wrestling podcast.
All right, well, why don't we talk about an actual match, and that's the match you do have coming up this Sunday. Big 6-man tag, the entire management team of Defiant Wrestling going up against the Anti-Fun Police. Now, this past week on Loaded, it was a little bit worrying, I thought, what we saw from you guys back in General Amin's office, backstage, where there seemed to be, not involving you really, but dissent certainly between Amin and your deputy, your former deputy now, because you've resigned. Adam Foster. Now, can Foster and Amin coexist?
Of course they can. It's much like we were just talking about, right? It's the same kind of thing. Like, much as I am learning and trying to evolve myself through the wrestling world, Adam is just trying to do that as well with the management world. Obviously, he's been in wrestling and now he's trying his hand at something new. He makes some good decisions, he makes some bad decisions. Prince Amin, or General Amin, I should say, didn't like the one that he made. He got told off. It's just going to make them stronger. That brings people together. The reason they're able to talk to each other like that is because their relationship is so strong. As you saw, I chatted to them afterwards. It's all good. We're focused on the Anti-Fun Police. And that's who we need to focus on. Because let's not forget, a month ago now, whenever, the Anti-Fun Police, along with some of their friends, decided it would be a great idea to jump myself, David Starr, and Joe Hendry. And I haven't forgotten that. Hence why my first match back this Sunday is against the Anti-Fun Police. You don't take those things lying down. You just don't.
Now, I know you're not part of the management team anymore because you've given that up so you can focus on your wrestling, but you have been part of it throughout most of General Amin's reign. James here has had plenty to say about what he calls the chaotic nature of the management here in Defiant.
Can I just interject? Now, Mr. Miller, I did not personally say that anything you did was chaotic.
All on tape.
Listen, Dave. Now, I've had just about enough of you. My friend Simon Miller will beat you up if you continue this nonsense. But anyway, as I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted, I wasn't having a personal shot or taking a personal shot at Simon Miller. All I'm saying is that General Amin, how many guys is it going to take to run the show around here? How many assistants does one guy need? Now, Simon Miller, you've already given that up. You want to get back in the ring. You are getting back in the ring. And I have to ask you, I wouldn't be a proper broadcast journalist if I didn't. Are you seeking a path to get away from General Amin and all the chaos that follows him?
Absolutely not. Hence why we're teaming up. That's why we're teaming up on Loaded. Like, the only reason I decided to take myself out of the management picture is because it's a conflict of interest. And that's not how I live my life. Let's face it, there's already a big enough conflict when it comes to the quote-unquote YouTuber trying to become a wrestler. Let's not add to that, and let's double down on what's important. It was a privilege and it was a pleasure to be able to be a part of, the people making a say here in Defiant. But the reason I got into this is to become a pro wrestler.
Sorry, Simon. In James's partial defence, it has been quite chaotic recently, right? Because there's been several groups running around, anti-fun police. Don't nod. I'm not fully agreeing with you. We're not mates. Then there's been Gabriel Kidd. There's been John Klinger. Of course, Rory Coyle.
But is that chaotic nature because of the management, or is that because of the people in Defiant?
Well, I wasn't going to get into the management. I think you've answered that. My question though is because a lot of those guys, maybe not Coyle, but the rest of those people I just mentioned, a lot of that's involved you.
They did have a problem with me.
So hopefully this Sunday you can get this problem of the anti-fun police out of the way. But presumably you still have a bit of beef with Kidd, with Klinger. So who's next? Assuming you win Sunday.
I think that's the most important thing. Much like any good sports team, you always focus on your next match and you go from there. So let's get the anti-fun police out of the way. Let's prove to them what they did was a huge mistake. And you're right, there is a list. There is John Klinger. There's Gabriel Kidd.
Am I on the list?
You're close. You're close. You're close to being on the list. But there's always redemption is a wonderful thing. But no, now I am back. I think it's time for me maybe it's up to me to try and bring some calm back to Defiant Wrestling. I can do that by slapping my own head and then going slapping somebody else's too.
Simon's too polite to say you're not important enough to be on the list. I think that's the main problem.
What is your problem? Well, I mean, honestly, I'm getting sick of this. Now, previously on the ReLoaded podcast, I brought excellent guests. The tag team champions, John Klinger, Rory Coyle even stopped by. Okay, that was nothing to do with me, but nonetheless, a former Defiant World Heavyweight Champion. And then you bring your buddy Simon Miller on here to tag team me. What's going on?
We were friends a minute ago, don't forget. Look how quickly it changes. Never turn your back.
He's very fickle.
He's very fickle.
I'm under pressure. That's what I'm under.
Right.
Once you've got through your list,
yeah,
I want to talk about what James here thinks is impossible, which is turning your attention to a world championship. Now, coming up 25th of May in Manchester is, of course, the No Regrets Rumble. I'm
Means a lot to me.
Wondering whether you've had any thoughts about whether you might be entering.
Two things. You never turn good opportunities down. What that means, what that doesn't mean, who knows, right? But also, let's not forget that's 1 year. That'll be 1 year since I debuted here in Defiant. Not only debuted, but first match I ever had as a pro wrestler. And I think there's something poetic in that. Something cheesy in it too, but that's all right. There's nothing wrong with a bit of that. So we'll just have to wait and see. Again, anti-fun police first. And then maybe at No Regrets there's a couple of things I can take care of. And maybe one of them is the Rumble. Maybe it's not.
All right, we'll take that as a maybe, I think.
It is a maybe. I'm not going into this blind. Let's just say that. I have a plan. I want to execute that plan. And if nothing else, I want to prove to a lot of people, my friend James here being one, that it's not fun and games for me. It is fun and games because wrestling is great, but it's not it's not me one day waking up being, lol, wouldn't it be fun to be a wrestler? It's something I've wanted to do for a long time, but for many reasons didn't. And now here we are. So let's take it day by day and let's enjoy ourselves.
All right, now, since you're such good friends, I want to give James a chance to ask the last question. You got anything else you want to ask? Maybe an apology. We'll give you a second chance at that. Or anything else you want to ask Simon while we've got him here?
Well, listen, I think Mr. Miller. I'm going to call you Mr. Miller
Okay,
because I
that's
think
fine.
Simon is a little bit. Dave's been a little bit presumptuous of your friendship. You did say I was your friend. I think we got off on the wrong foot because you make a very good point about the No Regrets Rumble. Yes, you made your debut in that match last year, and yes, anyone can win this. 30 of the best wrestlers in Defiant are going to vie for that opportunity. Yes, you can win it, and might I say, I'm going to be rooting for you, friend.
I 100% believe you. I've never heard more honest words in my entire life.
So sincere.
So sincere, so honest, so true.
Well, you know what? I think you've been very restrained, Simon,
Hey
given
man,
what
I
given what you said
always
about
will.
last week.
Apart from when I get in the ring, and then hopefully I can prove to people I can whoop some ass.
Well, pleasure, and good luck for Sunday. Thank
you,
you
my
for
friends.
joining us
Thank
on
you.
the show.
You want to shake my hand? Want to shake my hand?
Well, I think the question is, do you want to shake
It's
mine?
right there. Take it. Oh, look at that 12-year-old. I moved my hand out of the way for those in podcast land. 12-year-old tactics. See, I can be an idiot too. Everyone can be a jackass.
Visual joke there on an audio podcast.
I explained it. It's fine. Everyone can be a jackass. That's what we've learned today.
All right, well, Simon Miller, thank you for joining us. Well, I enjoyed that. I don't know why you were so miserable throughout that. I thought that was a really good interview. Simon had a lot to say.
But that's not the point. The point is that for the majority of that interview, he was staring a hole right through me. I mean, you've seen the size of that man's muscles. Now, other professionals on the Defiant roster, other professional wrestlers, they might view Simon Miller as a soft touch, or they might think that his shoulder injury has weakened him sufficiently that they could take advantage. But I am not a professional wrestler. Despite my amazing 1-on-1 match record, I am not a pro wrestler, so I was very intimidated. The man is huge.
He is big, but he's also, as you say, a professional wrestler. And as a professional, I don't think he would attack you. So I think you were a little bit worried about nothing. One thing you did say, though, and it was particularly a highlight of the interview, I thought, was that Simon will never be a world champion. He had plenty to say about that. But on that note, let's talk about the Defiant World Championship. And interestingly, this situation now between Rampage, who of course is now a 2-time champion, Rory Coyle, the man who Rampage beat to regain the championship at Lights Out, and now Justin Sizem in the mix as well. So for those who didn't see Loaded on Sunday, Rory Coyle came out to the ring at the very beginning of the show to basically talk about how he'd sort of got what he wanted, even though he'd lost the title because he'd brought out the monster in Rampage. And then Rampage came out to the ring. Coyle offered him a handshake. But before Rampage could make that choice about whether to shake the hand of Rory Coyle, Justin Sizem came out. So let me start by asking you, why do you think Justin Sizem felt the need to interrupt that interaction between Rampage and Coyle?
Well, I believe that Sizem has watched Coyle for a while now, and he can see that the former Defiant World Heavyweight Champion, he almost gets off on polluting the minds of his victims. And victims is exactly what I'm going to call them, Dave, because that's exactly what they are. Coyle feeds on people's minds, and inevitably he turns them against their better senses. Now, Rampage is one of the most mentally tough and physically tough wrestlers on planet Earth today. And Rory Coyle is slowly but surely chipping away at his psyche. And I think that Justin Sizem, he doesn't like what he's seeing, and he fears the worst. If Rory Coyle can turn this alpha male Rampage into the monster that he's wanted all along, we've seen it in fits and starts, on pay-per-view, on Loaded. We've seen it here and there, but not fully. And I think if Rampage turns into the monster that Coyle craves, we're all in trouble. Justin Sizem knows that.
You know what? I'm going to agree with you. It's a rarity,
What?
but I will agree with you. Because I think what I find really interesting here about the fact that Sizem felt the need to come out is that Justin Sizem is someone who knows Rampage very, very well. Now, for those who aren't familiar, Sizem and Rampage have been fighting up and down the country, not just in Defiant, but in other places as well, most notably perhaps on WRS Wrestling on ITV last summer, where if you remember, it was Sizem who defeated Rampage for the championship at the end of that series. So they know each other inside out, Rampage and Sizem. Now, I thought they'd reached some level of respect for each other when Sizem offered to put his number one contendership on the line ahead of Lights Out, and we all know how that ended up with Rampage winning the match and going on to win the title. So it's really interesting that Sizem didn't have sufficient confidence that Rampage would reject that handshake offer from Rory Coyle, that he felt he had to come out to the ring and essentially implore Rampage to choose order over chaos. That is a very interesting decision by someone who knows Rampage very well, and it suggests that Sizem thinks Rampage was tempted.
And what was it you said on Loaded? You know, when Rampage left the ring, he didn't take a step towards Justin Sizem. Now, maybe that worries the superhero because, you know, Sizem would like to think that he could appeal to Rampage's better senses and convince him. You know, it shouldn't take much to convince someone to stay away from an evil entity like Rory Coyle is. But Sizem must be so confused because, to what you said on Loaded, Bradshaw, Rampage just left. And then after that, Rory Coyle said, "We're not finished, superhero." His minions attacked Sizem. Thankfully, Sizem was able to fight them off. But now, we're left at this impasse where Sysum wants to wrestle Coyle. He wants to end this video nasty once and for all. But, you know, there's a big factor in this, and that is, where does Rampage stand?
Yeah, and I don't know whether we'll get any closer to answering that. Maybe I would think we might on Sunday, because if Coyle and Sysum are in the same ring, as they will be when they go one-on-one this weekend, then Rampage will have had a full 7 days to ruminate on this question of whether Coyle had a point, whether Sysum was right all along, or whether what I think is probably the most likely is that, as you say, he didn't take a step towards Coyle and shake his hand, but he also didn't take a step towards Sysum. And the reason for that is that Rampage, for all of his brilliant ability as a champion, he's kind of a loner. You know, Rampage isn't someone he doesn't hang out with big groups of people. You know, he's always been someone to go it alone. And as much as I don't think really that he's going to seriously contemplate joining Coyle, Sysum clearly thinks that. And what I think is most likely to happen is that Rampage isn't going to want to join with either of those two, because he's a man who you know, he treads his own path.
But you would think, you know, we both know that Rampage, we have watched him at the meet and greets, we've watched him interact with fans, young and old, and he is the consummate gentleman with every single one of them. He is an absolutely tremendous representative for Defiant Wrestling.
Yeah, but
you would believe...
Well, hang on a second though, but that's a very different thing, because one of the reasons that Rampage is such a great ambassador for this company is that he is entirely different between the ropes than he is outside of it. He is someone who is very pleasant, very, very generous with fans. We've seen that time and time again. And there's a great relationship between Rampage and the fans, no doubt about that. But he is a fierce, fierce competitor when he's in the ring. And that is something that he does on his own. He's not someone who wants to have someone in his corner, someone fighting his battles for him. It's always been Rampage against the world when it comes to in-ring competition.
He is, no doubt about it. Rampage is a different beast when that bell rings, especially when that Defiant Championship is up for grabs. But listen, Rory Coyle has came out of nowhere, and he's, you know, driven Primate out of Defiant Wrestling. He then set his sights on Rampage, and he said about Rampage, and this chilled me to the core, I don't want the best wrestler that is Rampage. I want the monster that lurks beneath. That's what he wants to bring out. As I say, we've seen it in bits and pieces. We haven't seen it permanently yet, but there's the key word, yet. Because Rory Coyle is chipping away at the psyche of everyone he comes into contact with. Justin Sysum wants to stop that. There's only one way, and that's destroy the force that is Rory Coyle. Sysum's going to have to do that next week. He's going to have to end this maniacal monster, quite frankly, the psychopathic video nasty that is Rory Coyle. Sysum has to put him out to pasture for good. It's the only way to save Rampage, the only way to save Defiant.
I mean, to be fair to Sysum, I guess he's probably not looking for, you know, Rampage to give him a big hug and form a tag team or anything like that. What Sysum is looking for is specifically for him to carry on being the Rampage he is, right? Rather than to somehow listen to the poison that's coming out of the mouth of Rory Coyle. So from Sysum's perspective, maybe what I'm talking about is precisely what that's all he wants. He just wants Rampage to continue being Rampage. He can continue to go it alone, but just to be that champion he has been for the better part of a year here in Defiant, rather than in any way entertaining what's coming out of that mouth of that psychopath. And he is a psychopath, Rory Coyle.
100% a psychopath. Now, our next big pay-per-view is called No Regrets on May 25th in Manchester. Justin Sysum next week against Rory Coyle. He has to have no regrets. No regrets whatsoever. He has to leave everything in that ring. He has to end Coyle for good. It's the only way. Now, I'm not going to apologise for repeating myself, because it must happen. This man is that evil. Someone has to take a stand. Justin Sysum has put himself to the front of that line. Now we're going to have to sit and watch. Can he end Coyle for good?
Well, it's going to be a very interesting week this Sunday on Loaded. We've already talked about those big matches we have coming up on Sunday, including Rory Coyle against Justin Sison. Plus, as we've talked about, Mark Haskins, David Starr, and Nathan Cruz, one of those three men, will become the number one contender for Rampage's world title going into No Regrets. And then that six-man tag as well, as the Defiant management team of General Amin and Adam Foster, team with the former assistant manager, Simon Miller, with making his in-ring return after almost 3/4 of a year. Those three going up against the Anti-Fun Police. It all happens on Loaded this Sunday from 8 p.m. UK time on the Defiant Wrestling YouTube channel. So make sure you tune in. And in the meantime, if you want to join the conversation and tell us what you think about all three of those matches before Sunday, do so using the hashtag #WeAreDefiant to join the conversation online. Now, if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's @Dave Bradshaw. How do people follow you?
Well, you can follow me on Twitter and or Instagram @TopClassKennedy, but I've got a bone to pick with everyone this week.
Go on.
Well, I've been staying off Twitter and Instagram and Facebook.
No, you haven't. You're in there like twice a day throwing insults at me. What do you mean you're staying off Twitter?
Yeah, but that's via DM. That's different. I don't need to look at my timeline and see that it's being polluted with all these people staying up to silly o'clock in the UK to watch Game of Thrones. Let me tell you something about Game of Thrones. That show is for losers. Now, if you're a cultured individual like me, you're going to fill your time reading books about poetry, politics, the world, and also you're going to fill your TV time watching cultured hip shows like I do. And I'm talking about shows like Xena Warrior Princess, because that show, Dave Bradshaw, made me the warrior of a man that I am today. Game of Thrones. Pah! It's a Lord of the Rings ripoff. I bet you love it, Bradshaw.
I do love Game of Thrones, and I bet you're one of those people who post smug tweets or Facebook posts saying, "I've never seen Game of Thrones," aren't you? You're one of them.
No, do you know what I do?
You're one of them.
What I like to do is actually, because I have many friends in the film and TV industry, is I sleuth my way in and I ask them, what's going to happen on the next episode? And then I spoil it for everyone. Yeah. That's what I do, because no one should watch this trash. It's mindless.
Well, that wouldn't surprise me either. But all right, so I guess you won't be watching that this week. Anything else going on this week? We've got about 10 seconds left, so keep it quick.
Well, I'm going to be going shopping for some new jackets. We've got a huge pay-per-view coming up, No Regrets, and I don't want to have any regrets when I turn up in Manchester. I want to look like the fashionista that I am.
Great. I don't have time to respond to that, but respond I would love to. Let's leave it there. We will be back on the Reloaded podcast next week. Obviously, before that, we'll see you for Loaded on Sunday. Big episode of Loaded this week. But in the meantime, thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next week for more from the Reloaded podcast.